Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Now, I did have a video planned, which was going to be after I put out my little reading of that book where I had 10 strokes, which, Jesus Christ, I am in real trouble right now if I'm having that many strokes again in one video, pushing my average strokes to 4.25 a day. I think the NHS would love to see me, as they'd like to say, you're due for death row, basically. But, of course, you didn't come here to find out what my situation is as far as my inability to speak is concerned. No, I want to talk about the Reform Party, and in particular, Lee Anderson and Nigel the Phony Farage, because the one TLDR that I will put in here right now is that Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson have lost the support of Paul Thorpe. They have set in stone what was already confirmed by me, which is I have lost respect and support for reform long ago, and now they've completely made it so they're irredeemable in my eyes, quite frankly. Because what was said by Nigel the Phony Farage when they were talking about Tommy Robinson was completely and utterly disgusting. Completely contemptible, what they said. Now, of course, Nigel Farage does say a couple of factual things, in that Tommy Robinson is now currently in prison for the third contempt of court. However, I will argue this point, since they are arguing contempt of court for the third time. The first time he went to jail for contempt of court was because he had no idea at the time that you can't step on the grounds of the court. If you do that, they can arrest you for contempt of court. Just like that. So he took the time to go to, was it Kings and Apley, I believe, to learn everything about contempt of court. The second time he went to jail for contempt of court, after learning about all this stuff, was actually a false charge of contempt of court, based off of the Leeds grooming gang case, which basically everything that was reported about the Leeds grooming gang case that was taking place in 2018 was already in the public domain. Stroke number one, I'm off to a good start. Already in the public domain by the BBC and other mainstream media. So there was no way that Tommy Robinson could commit contempt of court, and I nearly had another stroke in about the space of 20 seconds. Christ. But everything he said in the public domain. So the second time he went to jail was actually on a false charge of contempt of court, and a second false charge of breaching the peace, which they changed into contempt of court. But of course the mainstream media won't tell you this. You know the drill, folks. Because say it with me. It doesn't suit the narrative. No, they'd rather you conveniently forget about the fact that everything Tommy Robinson had said was in the public domain, and he did not plead guilty to contempt of court like the mainstream media tried to tell us. So, technically, he's only in there on a second legitimate contempt of court charge. What say you, mainstream media? And what say you, Nigel the Phony Farage, knowing full well that you have pushed out a libelous statement about Tommy Robinson again? Now, something else that Nigel Farage said about Tommy Robinson is he's one of the people who's fought the grooming gangs. Yes, that is the truth. That is 100% the truth. He was mentioning about the grooming gangs long before the mainstream media and the police were forced to talk about it. He single-handedly forced the mainstream media and the police to talk about it. But Nigel Farage doesn't want to admit that. That's the thing. He's even admitted himself that he sees Tommy Robinson as someone who is very supportive of the party. He has been very supportive of reform. But I am basically going to read out what it says from the transcript, because this is where I found the video of Nigel Farage talking, from this video. And I will link Paul Thorpe's video in the description below so you can see the transcript for yourself as well. So, what he said about Tommy Robinson is, and I quote, pushed it a little bit too quickly there. The truth is, Tommy Robinson is in prison not for that, fighting against the grooming gangs, but for contempt of court for the third occasion. We've already established it's the second. So, that's what I mean. Equally, there are people in Britain who think that Robinson is a political prisoner. That's the narrative that he's pushed out, and that's how he earns his living. End quote. So what Nigel Farage is implying is that Tommy Robinson makes his living as a grifter. Basically saying, I'm a political prisoner, I'm being persecuted, please support me. No! No, that is not the case. People have been supporting Tommy Robinson since way back when he first started in the 2010s. So don't come that bullshit, Nigel Farage. Do not come that bullshit for 1 second. Nobody here will accept this nonsense that Tommy Robinson earns a living by going to jail. What an absolutely reprehensible thing to say to Tommy Robinson. And he wonders why people are quite rightly pissed off at him and the Reform Party. And speaking of the Reform Party, there was a conference hosted by Lee Anderson and the Reform Party, which basically one person had said, and I believe, listen to Tommy Robinson, or it was, what about Tommy Robinson? It was one of the two. To which he basically responded, and I'm actually going to get this thing to play for itself so you can hear it for yourself. Now, I hope this works.
Just this week, Labour's... Look, are you going to shut up or just go out? Do you want to come up here and speak? Do you want to come up?
Yeah, that's what he said. He basically told the man to shut up when he suggested Tommy Robinson. And the absolute scowl across Lee Anderson's face really paints a picture that doesn't even say 1,000 words. It says 10,000, quite frankly. You can see the absolute disgust in that man when Tommy Robinson is mentioned. Now, I accept that there is some semblance of they need to protect themselves from the mainstream media, because if they have Tommy Robinson on board, the mainstream media, the oligarchy, are going to absolutely descend on them. Just like that. And they will destroy any chance of the Reform Party getting in power. I accept that. I accept that they have to play it cautiously, because otherwise it's going to lead to a very, very bad situation. I'm not going to argue the toss of that. Tommy Robinson wouldn't argue the toss of that. Paul Thorpe didn't argue the toss of that. But it really does showcase the absolute contempt that these two people have for ordinary people who are very supportive of Tommy Robinson and for Tommy Robinson himself. They have repeatedly thrown this man under the bus. In fact, I would go as far as saying they haven't even just thrown him under a bus, they've thrown him under a fucking Abrams tank, quite frankly. It's disgraceful to think that Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson are willing to be this brazen now about stabbing people in the back. And quite frankly, this is why, as well, this is just another nail in their coffin, as my stroke number 2. My humble opinion on why I think they are nailing themselves here. This is why I say I think we should be going with with UKIP rather than Reform, because we have seen time and time again that Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson are willing to put a knife in the back of us. They don't want our votes because they genuinely care for us. They want our votes so they can get in power and claim more power, more titles, more wealth, and more glory. That's it. That's the cold, bitter truth on the matter. And it's just a shame that this is the path they've chosen. And I think a lot of people are now going to be completely tuned out of voting for Reform. Just remember, when we had that march on the 27th of July, and Tommy Robinson said, how many of you here voted for traitor? Sorry, I mean Labour. Or maybe I was right first time. Nobody called out. Nobody cheered. Then he asked how many people voted for the con in Conservatives. And no one cheered out. And when he said, how many of you voted for Reform? The whole crowd erupted. Well, I'll tell you what. With this latest bit of treachery, this latest bit of backstabbing, the chance of that ever happening again has gone with the wind. And I'm not talking about the wind that comes out of my arse. Anyway, their chances of getting those votes back now have completely gone in the wind. They've got no chance of getting them back, quite frankly. Nor do they deserve your votes. Because I think we should have enough respect for ourselves that we do not let people walk over us like doormats. I think this is a perfect opportunity to teach Nigel the phony Farage a harsh lesson. And Lee Angrily Anderson. Because, frankly, that's the picture I see when he made that scowl. Nick Tenconi, it's my message directly to you now. There are loads of people out there, loads of people who are looking for someone to follow, looking for someone who is worthy of their vote, looking for someone who, frankly, we need a hero. We need a hero till the end of the night. They've got to be stronger, they've got to be faster, they've got to be fresh from the fight. No, sorry. They have got to be willing to make that change. Willing to have the balls, whether up here or down there, or in my case, both, to be able to make those hard decisions and support the British people through thick and thin. The Rona will not kill me, I promise you. But we need someone who actually will stand by the British people. Nigel the phony Farage and Lee Angrily Anderson and Richard trash-talking Tice, they're not in it for us. But I see you are, Nick Tenconi. I see you are, because you were willing to stand up and say, I stand with that lot. You were willing to say, we will stand with the British people who support Tommy Robinson. And frankly, that takes a lot of guts, and it will show if we can get you lot in power. They've even said, for the people viewing, Nick's even said that he's willing to get Tommy Robinson into the Houses of Parliament. Or is it the Houses of Treachery? I can't remember. But anyway, he's willing to get him in as an MP. But I believe he said it was like 2029 or 2031 or whatever it was. I think that's a little bit too late. But I think if a snap election is called, and you can get people like him in, people like me in if you want me, I'll happily stand for Norwich. I know there are a few liberals who will want my head on a spike, but I will happily stand for Norwich. I know not an awful lot about politics, but I'm willing to learn. And there's one thing that I've always had that is of great strength to me, quite frankly, and that is I learn naturally quickly. If you're willing, I'll happily come along for the ride. And together, Nick Tenconi, we will show these phonies who claim to be in it for the British people who the real patriots, who the real leaders truly are. Because we need a real leader if we hope to stop the oligarchy's control of Great Britannia.